Back again on this Friday afternoon for a double header. And there have been a number of guests that people have emailed me for a long time and said you should get this person on the show. I don't know if there's another guest who I've received more email requests for than you, sir. Clif High, welcome to the program.
Thank you much. That's kind of a scary statement.
Well, it's lovely to meet you, Clif, and I really want to thank you for coming on the show. Everybody is super interested in, and many people confused by, cryptocurrency. And I know you're an expert. You've done a lot of work back in the day on AI, linguistics, transhumanism, is that correct? Not transhumanism. Oh, so the half-past human, and I thought that was... Tell us a bit about your background.
Actually, I never thought of it that way. Interesting. The ambiguity of language bites us in the ass all the time.
There you go. I'll change the title later. But so what can you tell us, for the people that are maybe not familiar with you, those that have been living under a rock, what's the top line? What do we need to know about Clif High before we dig into this conversation?
I understand software and machinery, and yet I have an alternative bent. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a strict materialist, that kind of thing, right?
Got it. And you were very early on cryptocurrency and...
Oh yeah. I've been in Bitcoin since before the Mt. Gox crash. I remember the great day when Bitcoin achieved parity with the U.S. dollar, one for one.
Right.
So I've been in it a long time. Yeah.
When did Bitcoin start?
Nominally, it began circulating in late 2009 in the form of a white paper, and so Bitcoin was an idea then. An idea of a currency that ran on a thing called a blockchain, which was a consensus machine. And that consensus machine could operate across time zones, across geographic barriers, instantly or close to it. And we could have a system where we could have an electronic currency that couldn't be double spent because of the consensus machine that was the blockchain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the blockchain, as we've established, is basically a ledger that's stored on every computer that's involved with Bitcoin. Is that correct?
No, it's a ledger that's stored in every computer that is mining or has a copy of the entire chain. So it used to be that when you got into Bitcoin, you would download a Bitcoin wallet, and the first thing it would do would be to connect to the blockchain and take 5 days or 6 days, depending on when it was.
Wow.
And it would then connect, and you had to let it run until it had an entire copy of the chain on your PC, and then it was relatively fast.
Got it.
And since then, we've gotten a little bit more diversified in our understanding of this. We've separated the concept of the wallets from the mining. Mining is done by specialized software, etc. So it's not fair to say that every machine that has a Bitcoin on it has a copy of the blockchain, although many that are old do.
Okay. I should clarify, I'm a Bitcoin novice. I know very, very little about Bitcoin, and that is a big part of the reason why I want to speak to you and other people. You and I became acquainted most recently because of some of the controversial statements that Quinn Michaels has made on this channel, and I understand that you disagreed in large part with some of the things that Quinn said. Quinn was basically saying that AI and cryptocurrency are tied together. You say that's not the case.
Correct. That's not the case. AI can be quite sophisticated. It's still a brute force software that just goes through and makes choices based on the inputs. But the blockchain is more solid, but at the same time far less sophisticated. The blockchain is a consensus algorithm, and that's all it is. And this algorithm is shared in software that's run on the mining machines, and they're all synced on atomic clocks. And that's essentially all that it is. To merge the idea of AI in with the software that is the blockchain and or the cryptocurrencies does everything a disservice. It muddies the water for those that are afraid of AI, that have watched too many movies of, the giant robot that comes and eats us all, or the computer that decides it's alive, that kind of thing.
Right.
Anyway, those people become scared. They don't want to mess with the cryptocurrencies or get involved. and it also denigrates the AI, which is a very sophisticated level of programming involving collection of data that they refer to as machine learning, but the machine doesn't really learn. We just stuff databases with a finer granularity that we can sift through at a finer level, really is all that it amounts to. So I did have some dispute with the statements that were made, yes.
Sure. And on your website, Half Past Human, you've been involved, of course, with predictive linguistics, and artificial intelligence plays a role there somehow, right? Yeah, I was reading there you've been doing AI stuff for quite a while.
I began doing AI when I first got into programming on my own system using a language called Prolog. It was one of two languages back in the day, like the late 80s, early 90s, that was touted as being a artificial intelligence language, the other one being Lisp. I chose Prolog for a number of different reasons, but it's programming in logic or predicate calculus, and it was used to make what we called at the time expert systems. And an expert system is basically a brain dump from somebody who knows how to do something to a coder who then encodes it in software. And so, for instance, you could do a brain dump on a mechanic, and he could diagnose, and we could do a chunk of software that would do diagnostics on a car based on what a human said about it, the kind of noises and this sort of thing. So all it is that person's expert analysis translated into software. And so AI at the time was called expert systems. It was a lot less sophisticated than now because it was all basically manual. One human had to tell another human who typed it all into an encoding platform we call software, and then it would run and we'd get feedback from it. So I've been doing this since about '89.
Wow.
And I use some of the aspects of natural language processing in my own system for predictive linguistics, which these days is called sentiment analysis. The large corporations, they don't hire predictive linguistics experts. They hire people that are expert in sentiment analysis software or some language around that kind of a different kind of a categorization of the subject. So you'll see that it's well established in all the corporations that are doing any form of marketing, from Google all the way down to your local tire company.
So sentiment analysis, that's like some computer program is looking at the comments on a YouTube video and saying, hey, people are angry about this, let's put some trolly comments in along this line or something like that?
Not quite that sophisticated. The software that I've run into that is out and about isn't so definitive as to say that they're angry. It comes back with results that are more nuanced, where it says this comment shades towards negative, or this comment shades towards positive, or this comment appears to be neutral, or this is a complex comment that has both aspects. And then you have a further level of an algorithm that decides what to do based on whether you're a bad guy or you're trying to market or whatever.
Right. Now, so there was an article recently that said that Bitcoin mining was going to consume all of the world's electric power generation or something like that by 2030. I think I've got it right here. This is an article from Business Insider. I don't know if we trust them or not. Oh, and they want me to not have an ad blocker going right here. But what do you think about that statement? Is it true or untrue? Will Bitcoin
it's
mining...
hyperbole. It's basically bullshit. Because a Bitcoin miner is just a bunch of graphics cards. In order to consume all of the electricity on the planet, imagine how many graphics cards would have to be in operation. You'd have to have at least 50 or 80 in your place right there. I'd have to have another couple of hundred here, and everybody on the planet would have to have a few hundred just to be able to get this going. It's a FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and it's just a way of clickbait, a way of getting eyes to your particular message.
I'll tell you, Business Insider loves having ads all over their webpage, so much so you can't even read the article. It says the electricity used to mine Bitcoin this year is bigger than the annual usage of 159 currencies. I mean, I can barely read this article because it's appearing in a thin slit below the advertisement. And you know, Cliff, Crowdsource the Truth here is a community-sponsored news agency, and we never take ads for specifically this reason. They crap up the webpage, and I don't like them. But so you don't think that this is a significant concern, that the growing demand for Bitcoin will be taxing on the world's electricity supply? I mean, people would stop mining it if it was costing more for the electric bill than the value of the Bitcoins, right?
Correct. And also the mining operations have changed dramatically in the last 7 years. When it was first started off, it was basically a bunch of people that had spare computers sitting around,
Right.
wrote a lot of their own software, etc. But there's no reason to suppose that in order to supply Bitcoins, we need to have vast quantities of miners. This is not like a forest and we're dealing with firewood, right? We don't have to grow more trees in order to produce more wood for more people just because there's demand. Here we have the ability to just do stuff within the same environment and create more Bitcoin just based on the algorithms involved. So we're going to create the Bitcoin just because we're mining. We're only going to mine at a certain rate no matter what. Mm-hmm. So it's an instance of we've got 17 plus million Bitcoin now. Say that demand went up tenfold, it just means we have to share smaller and smaller bits because we're not going to get any more Bitcoin any faster, no matter how many miners we put on.
You mean fractions of Bitcoins?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Satoshis. And see, the thing is that Bitcoin is controlled at its core by the consensus algorithm of the blockchain, but also by this thing that's called the hash. And the hash is an algorithm that encodes and encrypts the private and public keys involved in the transaction. That hash increasingly becomes more difficult over time. And so the harder you mine Bitcoin, the more it resists being mined.
Right.
So it does not make any sense to envision a world where you have to put more electricity into trying to do it faster.
So is this just disinformation being put out by people who are maybe owning banks and have an interest in keeping the petrodollar and fiat currencies?
That's speculation. The only thing we can say for sure is that it was clickbait from that site, at least because they've got all those ads there. They're trying to use whatever they can to get you to come and read their site. That was a provocative headline, you know.
Very good point. Well, Bitcoin right now is at an amazing $10,790 US, according to Coinbase. I know a lot of people have different exchanges that they like to look at. And, you know, the other day I went down to Wall Street. I don't know if you've had a chance to check out that video. I went down, it was called Is Wall Street Bullish on Bitcoin? And I'm sure you won't be surprised to learn that they were not, in fact, bullish on Bitcoin at all.
No.
They didn't want to talk about it.
I haven't had a chance to see the video. I knew you were going to make it, but I've just been too busy doing other things. I'll have to go and check it out. So the consensus was, we don't care?
Well, it wasn't that they didn't care. There were some people down there who knew about it, and there were, you know, most people just felt that they didn't want to talk about it. I think mostly because of like regulatory, I don't know what, like legal stockbroker stuff. But multiple people said they did not want to talk about it. A lot of traditional-minded investors that I speak to say they don't understand it, they don't trust it. I mean, some of the typical things that people who aren't as well-versed in computer software and cryptography and all that stuff as you are, people are fearful of it being hacked. And you mentioned this Mt. Gox situation. That was a hack, wasn't it?
No,
what
it was
happened
not
with
a hack.
Mt. Gox?
Okay, Mt. Gox started off as a trading site for intangible goods based around a game, a role-playing game called, let's see, it was something, the Game Online Exchange, Mystery or something like that. I don't play games, so I'm uncertain, but it was a card game, and you could sell and swap the tokens within the game. And then they added on Bitcoin. When they did that, they made a certain strategic decision. The decision was to not always have 100% of the Bitcoins that everybody was buying. Okay? What they actually did was they didn't get the cash to try and acquire a Bitcoin, they would do it initially. Maybe they had someone buy 6 Bitcoins and they bought 10. Then thereafter, they had somebody buy another 7, and only they're not moving them off the exchange. They just left the Bitcoins there. So it was fractional reserve Bitcoin sales, basically.
Reserve Bitcoin. There you go.
Right. Okay, and so it was all internal. They claimed it was a hack in order to get out from underneath this inverse pyramid that was going on at the time, right? They claimed it was a hack. There was no hack involved.
Really?
What had happened was they had not bought enough Bitcoin. People were trading the Bitcoin back and forth at a furious rate on Mt. Gox, making transactions with them. One day, Mt. Gox got a situation where someone had amassed, in sort of a poker game version of trading, had amassed a lot of the Bitcoin and then tried to take them off the exchange, and some of them didn't exist. And so everything crashed at that point. The blockchain per se can't be hacked. It could theoretically be taken over if you got 51% of all the miners to agree. Then they could change software, or they could decide to do something, and they would own the blockchain. But short of that, you can't in any way alter the blockchain itself. Bitcoin rides on top of the blockchain, and it can't be hacked per se either. You could do something stupid. You could take your private key, print it out, and be real proud of it and show it to everybody online, and you'd lose your Bitcoin, right? Because you were stupid and you shared private information. But the wallet on your PC cannot be hacked by someone squirreling through to come and take your Bitcoin. Like theoretically, they say the NSA has got backdoors in all of the PCs, etc., and they can come and steal all your Bitcoin. And theoretically, they maybe could, but the actual practicality of it's an absurd idea. It just is not going to happen. If you're not connected, obviously you can't be hacked that way. So the use of that word relative to the blockchain really annoys me, and because it's because it's so inaccurate. We've not yet had a hack on any of the blockchains. We've had some spectacular screw ups, okay, and this is bound to occur with software in anything that humans do, and so some of them are quite interesting. I happen to know of $14 million worth of Ethereum that's locked up behind a smart contract that they can't figure out how to open up.
Wow.
Okay, and it was because of the way they wrote the contract and some of the stuff they're doing, and everybody's running around, losing their minds over this because of the amount of money involved. But it hasn't gone anywhere. It's not disappeared. It was waiting for us to come up with a solution that convinced the smart contract to pony these things back up again. So in that sense, the blockchain is to a certain extent, it is immutable. So if you've got Bitcoin and you buy it off the exchange, and it makes a transaction on the blockchain, and it goes to your PC, and your PC is destroyed, your Bitcoin is not destroyed. As long as you have elsewhere the keys to that Bitcoin, or the password and stuff that allows you to recreate that wallet in its entirety to connect to the blockchain, it can recover and pick up from where you were. And this is true no matter where on the planet you end up having to be. So in that sense, it's much better than, say, gold or silver or cash sitting in your house, and a giant wave or a storm or something comes and takes your house out. Right. Well, here, if that occurs, you just walk on over to some place that's dry and warm and stuff, go into a motel, open up your laptop, download another wallet, recreate the whole thing, and you're back in business.
Right. Now let's get back to AI for a second, because another topic that we've been talking about quite a bit is, strong AI, and that has been coming up quite a lot lately with Sophia from Hanson Robotics, the first, Hanson Robotics doesn't want me to zoom in on their page, but of course, Sophia is the first robotic citizen of Saudi Arabia. And there is some kind of, tie
where she won't be allowed to drive.
No, they changed that about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
But there is something with blockchain. I've heard, one of the guys who is the principal at Singularity.net, Dr. Ben, what's his name, Goetzel or something like that? I'm sorry, Dr. Ben, I'm screwing with your last name there. But they've got this AGI token. Does that have nothing to do with cryptocurrency or blockchain?
Sure, but it's an attempt to tokenize an AI market. Okay, these guys are not saying they're going to merge AI with the blockchain and your coins are at risk from AI. Singularity is in fact attempting to create a marketplace for AI software and to have a lot of people cooperate by creating AI software, putting it out there to do work, and then getting paid through the software doing the work through their platform. And their platform is going to use those tokens as its means of expression between the parties involved. And it would be, like if I were to take part of my software and have a little predictive linguistics module and offer it for for work for hire on Singularity, I could do that. And then it would go out and negotiate contracts and do work for people. And then it's sort of like, excuse me, sort of like having an API or application programming interface into your software that you then allow people to use for money.
I see. Okay. Now, the other topic I wanted to ask you about, well, all these websites with their damn ads, very annoying. So we recently heard a statement from the founder of Wikipedia, and this I saw on, I think this was CNBC. He's saying that initial coin offerings, although they're the hottest craze in cryptocurrency, they're an absolute scam. That's from Jimmy Wales. What do you think about that statement?
Not much. I mean, that's his opinion. I don't find that to be the case. Actually, it's a new ICOs as opposed to IPOs. It's a new take on funding, and it cuts out the banks. It cuts out it's called disintermediation. It slices out a huge level in the middle. It's going to do away with all the people that made bonuses on offering shares of somebody else's company to their clients and taking money from all the parties and the transaction at all these different areas. Okay, so it's going to cut out the Wall Street people that are in the middle of IPOs. IPOs are dying as a funding mechanism, and the reason they're dying has to do with their structural incoherence and incompetence in today's age, and the costs that are involved that need not be there. And then we have an electronic, easier to understand peer-to-peer method that allows funding to occur. And so in that sense, no, it's not a scam. It's a legitimate way to fund an enterprise of almost any kind these days in terms of a commercial offering, right? If you're going to produce a product, if you're going to come out with new software, if you're going to send rocket ships to the moon, you don't want to mess around with IPOs and have bankers take 35% of everything that's involved. If you can also lower everybody's cost and get more money, you'd be foolish not to. And there's a benefit also to the investors here. In usual IPOs, you have all of these lockup periods, times you can't sell the shares that you've put money into. The returns are the huge returns, 50, 60, 80 baggers, they call them in Wall Street, right? Those go to the venture capitalists that are patient, that have managed to corner capital and keep it locked up and then feed it out under these particular circumstances. And so those kind of gains are never seen by the ordinary guy who buys in at the IPO and then basically gets little tiny returns, if any at all, on that investment within the system. Here we have in a different type of structure where instantly that the ICO is done and the coin is available, in some cases, it can be traded. So if you've bought it and 5 minutes later you think you've made a big mistake, someone is going to offer you money at a discount to take that mistake off your hands, betting that later on it will turn out to not be a big mistake and they'll make money on it. And maybe individuals will think, oh, it's not a mistake, maybe I'll buy a couple of more. And they hold on to these things, and they're small investors, and they don't necessarily meet the qualifications for sophisticated investors regarding, as the SEC, et cetera, would see it. But nonetheless, these people are the ones that are making the 50, 60, and 70, and 80, and sometimes hundreds of thousands times return on their investments. And the firms are getting money in a cleaner, easier fashion. The whole thing can be managed with smart contracts. If you don't get a certain amount, you can undo it all and send all of the money back. When's that ever happened with an IPO where you don't meet the float you want to get, and so you decide, okay, we don't have enough to do the deal, and everybody gets their money back. Yeah, it's never happened in any bank I know of.
Right. Okay, so now this another thing that happened the other day when I was doing that Wall Street, are they bullish on Bitcoin? I went down there because when I woke up in the morning, Bitcoin was like 11,700 or 11,400, something incredibly high. And while I was doing that live stream, people on the stream were telling me that Coinbase crashed. And here's an article right here on, I don't know this website, but it says Bitcoin exchanges crash the day after the U.S. demands cryptocurrency transaction info. What this is talking about, of course, is this case, the United States versus Coinbase, where basically the IRS sued and successfully sued Coinbase, saying that they want private information about people who are buying or selling more than $20,000 worth of cryptocurrency on the Coinbase exchange there. What do you think about all this?
It really muddies the water legally because the IRS has previously considered cryptocurrencies to be a capital gains category commodity, okay, not a currency. Now they're starting to try and extend the know your customer laws from banking over to the cryptocurrency exchanges as though these are in fact currencies. Okay, so
but isn't it supposed to be a currency, isn't it?
The government says no, that these are not currencies. They don't want competition to their monopolistic money offering of the dollar. Correct, right. They've got a monopoly on the dollar and currency, and they don't want it abrogated at all. And so they've always declared that cryptocurrencies were fine, go out and play all you want, but it's like buying, magic pumpkins out of a game for the next time you play the game. It's a capital gain expenditure, right? There's a $400 million market globally as people buying things that allow them to level up in games, these sorts of things. And the IRS has always treated, and that market's been going on for 15 or 20 years in that level of activity. And IRS has always treated that as a capital gains endeavor. So if you were a 16-year-old kid and you were good at the game, you could hoard the treasures and hawk them in the open market, and then you'd pay capital gains because you were too young to be paying earned income on it, right? And they've always maintained that. So now, though, it sounds like what they're trying to do with Coinbase is, they're understanding how fast it's changing. The whole fiat, the whole landscape underneath them, the financial sector landscape that accounts for 18% of the U.S. economy. B, it sounds like they're trying to start thinking of these things as currencies. And C, it sounds like they made a deal with Coinbase, and Coinbase says, and it was something effectively, that 20,000 is the limit. We're not going to give you any information on the people that are below this. And so it sounds like they worked out a solution, which I think is again muddying the waters in terms of how we think about this, because it seems as though a few years down the road, IRS will be considering these things to be actual currency, and it'll be going through more of a Forex kind of an approach for taxation, as opposed to the straight capital gains commodity kind of a taxation. And this is going to be a big shift, is in fact a big shift, is in fact occurring now, and it actually doesn't bode very well for the government. It's going to drive them crazy trying to decide what amount can be taxed in what kind of a transaction with cryptocurrencies, where you can have trading transactions that settle. Okay, unlike Wall Street, where nothing is settled since probably 1999. There's been no actual trading of stock certificates or bond certificates or any of that. Everybody dumps everything that they buy on their 401k to a company called Seed and Company. And this one individual owns all the stocks in the U.S., and it never settles, okay? So you never actually collect on any of the stock purchases or sales. You get fiat back occasionally. But these transactions settle. They're individually directed, so they don't go through a 1099 reporting organization. And it's going to be just hellacious for the government to input all of this level of transaction from all these millions of people that are going to voluntarily tell them, well, yeah, I traded, a tenth of an ether and I got 115 Populus coins, and I traded 7 of those and I got, 50 of these, and I got 15,000 dim coins, that kind of thing, right?
Well, that's part of the confusion, I think, is that there's so many of these coins. Buck Richardson in the comments here says Coinbase is a scam. I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think this guy is pretty much a butthead.
Okay.
the guy that's saying this. Coinbase is a fully operational business. I know they're a business because they're getting pressured by the IRS on this. I've run into this. I've been doing crypto business I've been involved in the crypto space since 2010-ish, and have been aware of all of the problems that the various states have thrown into the mix. So, for instance, a number of the exchanges won't deal with people in Washington State, where I live. And it's because Washington State government says if you're going to sell or have financial products that we consider these things to be financial products, not commodities. And if you're going to do this business in Washington State, we need to know who you're dealing with, how much they're spending, all of this kind of stuff. And so these exchanges say, nah, we don't want the reporting headache. We're not going to rat out our customers just because you government types demand it. We're just going to legally not do business with people in these states. And so it's not detrimental to the exchanges. Coinbase is now hauling in 100,000 new people a week, a day. I think it's a day maybe even now.
Wow.
Just a staggering. I mean, they're up to the 13, 14 million. They've got more people than some of the online brokers. Name a couple, and I'll tell you who they're large. Exactly. They've got more customers than these people by far.
Wow.
And they're only one of 5 or 6 exchanges that are available in the U.S., and they're all growing at that rate. And why not? You go to Scott Trade, you buy some stock. If you're lucky at the end of the year, it's up what? If you're lucky, 2, 3, 4%, right? Something. It's a very small amount. Whereas with the cryptocurrencies, it's a case of capital inflow. So if you position yourself ahead of the capital inflow, you ride that capital inflow wave up. And so I happen to know of a guy that bought at the dip the other day, and he's already up 9 or 10 or 11% on his money in 24 hours.
Huh.
So these kind of gains are possible as people exit the dying fiat and go into our new system. And basically, that's my understanding of it. That people that have a different understanding, occasionally you'll run into guys that are, as the fellow you were quoting, who's being a butthead about it, right? Calling Coinbase a scam.
Yeah.
Might as well call Google a scam, or but in any event, the potential here for the capital inflows is basically what caused the breakout of all of the cryptos. The fact that crypto is no longer just Bitcoin, all right? And in my understanding, there's a few of the currencies, and then there's a couple of platforms. These platforms are like Ethereum, and they have their token. And these platforms are software conduits that are blockchains that allow other people's software to run on that blockchain in a way that Bitcoin does not, for instance. And so we have the idea of smart contracts. And so Ethereum is worth something because it's a platform token that allows your smart contract to run on its network, and you can make money or do business with your smart contracts. And so there's coins, which are the currencies like Bitcoin, Litecoin. Then there's tokens like Ethereum that run for the platform. And then there's the company kind of tokens like Populus, Veritasium, OMG, Neo. All of these are companies that are doing business that is associated with the consensus machine, which is the blockchain of the Ethereum network. And so they're riding on, as we say, they're riding on the Ethereum rails. But these companies are what you're actually investing in. You buy their token, they get that money directly. All right. Unlike in an IPO where it goes through the bank and has to filter down and it's all washed, so to speak, in the process. Here it's direct. They get to build up their funds. They can go ahead and go out and go forth and conquer the world with their software. And you participate in the sense that that token becomes more valuable as their success grows. Mm-hmm. And it's a free market. That's why we have 19% down in one day and then 2 days up of 10% to get back over where we were and then off and running again because it's not controlled. This is going to be just marvelous for the CME experiment, okay? The COMEX, they're going to do
with that.
A commodity exchange, okay? These are the guys that sell gold and silver and all of this, all right?
Well, what's the experiment, I mean?
Well, the experiment is going to be that they've been allowed legally to sell disconnected futures on Bitcoin, all right? So they're not promising to ever buy a Bitcoin. It's merely a wager on Bitcoin in that sense. But it's a contract can purchase. And so this goes live, I think, on December 18th, something like that. And it was allowed to proceed by the powers that be in their regulation. I'm of the opinion that that system that is the COMEX is now placing itself at risk because it's going to be offering a futures and options and swaps market around a, quote, commodity that can experience a 20 or a 30 or a 40% fall in a day. So imagine what that's going to do to their idea of price discovery relative to their futures. And they can plot all they want, but this stuff is still highly erratic, still is emotionally driven. The markets are small enough that individuals can have a big sway over it, like, what's his name, the head of Goldman Sachs or whoever it was that was saying, or JP Morgan that was saying, Bitcoin is rubbish, while in fact they were buying as fast as they could as he was driving the price down. And so those kind of things will be occurring right and left in a Wild West kind of a fashion, and yet here these people are going to be offering what will amount to the ability to short or have options and futures on such a commodity.
So this article was just published 10 hours ago here on CNBC talking about CME to launch Bitcoin futures in 3 weeks after the green light from the regulator. Is this what the twins, the Winklevoss twins, is this what they were trying to put together? Something different?
This is something different. They were trying to do an exchange-traded fund. Basically, the ability to buy and sell Bitcoin as a hedge fund or as a large trading entity. This is something entirely different. Mm-hmm. These are people that are...
Sorry.
I would say this is from the people that have been manipulating gold and silver sales for 150 years. And they're trying to do the same with Bitcoin. They're trying to stabilize in their mind and control and profit from the interest in cryptocurrencies.
I detect from the tone of your voice that you expect that will not work.
I have reason to suspect that, yes.
So what do you think this CME experiment will do to the cost, or rather to the value of Bitcoin for people who are holding Bitcoin right now?
I don't think it's going to, it's going to go through a little wave, according to my data set, and it's going to initially have a little tiny bit of a pop in the price of a Bitcoin. When this comes on the 18th, there's going to be normal gyrations in Bitcoin, and the COMEX experiment will crash miserably, and people will freak out en masse, and the whole thing will be canceled, and then Bitcoin will go screaming back up as a result. And I've talked about it recently as the pre-Christmas or early December surprise.
I see.
It's going to affect a lot of the cryptos.
So what do you think is the most promising cryptocurrency right now? Or is that, I think I saw a video where you said you don't talk about that because you don't want to affect the market.
Yeah, I don't want to get into specific cryptos outside of my reports, and I'm careful in the language there. I don't say run out and buy XYZ cryptos.
Yes.
I do have a particular industry sectors that seem to be very well suited to blockchain activity. And so in that sense, we talk about some of those that are emerging, and there may be a number of crypto companies within these.
Well, before we go there, I just want to let people know that they can purchase that report on your website, which is halfpasthuman.com. And there's a link right there where people can purchase the report. They can support Clif High's research. What will people find in that report, Clif?
It's broken down into basically 3 sections. I give an analysis of some ICO companies that are coming in, the basic due diligence of these companies in terms of who the people are, have we been able to validate their claimed history, this sort of thing, facts and figures on them, and then some analysis of their business model, and that's in the middle section. And then we have what we call the flow, which is the predictive linguistics that gives a sort of a woo-woo or fringe view of what's going to happen over the next few months. It's actually predicting what's going to happen over the next few months in this section in a broad sense relative to the economy and where we're headed and some of the shocks that are going to be impacting us. Then the last section is an analysis of a number of the various different existing coins and tokens and where they will be relative to that flow of the next few months.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how much does it cost for people to purchase that report?
It's $99. The price is steep in that regard. I used to run the Alta reports at $15, but it's entirely focused for people that intend to profit from cryptocurrencies, and so the price is set as it is.
Got it. And of course, people can also follow you on Twitter. It's going to be Clif_High, CLIF_High on Twitter, and you've got kind of a bird there. I imagine you're tweeting quite a bit about cryptocurrency and all the stuff that we're talking about right now. Now, there was another interesting thing I wanted to ask you about, which came up in one of my previous conversations with Quinn. It seems that Russia is going to be the first country to actually introduce a government-backed cryptocurrency. There's this article here from just about, October 15th, saying that Russia is issuing crypto ruble. What's your take on this?
They're not the first. This is a sector that's known as sovereign tokens. Uh-huh. It's been successfully done in Singapore. And one other Southeast Asian nation state. I can't think of the name of it at the moment. So the ruble will be like the third, I believe. China is also considering it. We're looking at, there's a couple of island nations within the European zone that are also in the process of considering doing just this. You have to understand that the impetus for doing so is cost savings and accounting, because the ledgers are immutable, keeping a current copy of the distributed ledger for everybody. Then it really saves on accounting, because everybody can at any time download a copy of the ledger and off you go. You can extract whatever you want from it continuously, and it reduces the cost of creating and distributing currency, which actually, surprisingly, is significant for any government that has to deal with currencies on a very large level. And so India was trying to become a paperless state, so to speak, right? Digital currency only. And they ran into real issues because nobody trusts the Indian government. And so I can't imagine why. And so, so anyway, but some states like Singapore. Yeah, well, see, there you go. See, some places where there's a more homogeneous view of the central guiding tenets of the social order, like Singapore, you do have people that trust the government. They may bitch about it, they may complain about it, but in general, they find their government to be far less corrupt and far more amenable to citizen direction than other governments that they can find anything about. And so you get places where sovereign tokens make a lot of sense. Russia is like that as well. Russia is a situation where they've got vast areas of resources and a reasonably willing population, but not a very sophisticated capital market for exploiting those resources. So they have some difficulties getting off the dime, so to speak, to go out and get the minerals in order to make the new materials, etc. And so the crypto ruble will get them over a couple of hurdles.
I see. So are you feeling that the crypto ruble will be good overall for cryptocurrency? Will it be good for the dollar or bad for the dollar? Or what do we make of all that?
I think that the dollar has got its own issues independent of anything that goes on. Okay, the dollar is reduced down to less than 2 cents worth of purchasing power from its creation in 1913. So it really should be called the U.S. 2-center. It's not, because that's all it'll buy anymore. Wow. That's what planned central planning and inflation does to a currency. And we see the opposite of that occurring with the cryptos, where in fact the limitations that are put on them and the decentralized nature has people going into them, and they're rising, especially against the hyperinflating of the currencies. So the crypto ruble in no way is a nail in the coffin of the dollar or anything. But the dollar, the people that run it shot it, and it's been bleeding to death for the last 30 years.
I think it's bleeding oil. So you just spoke about decentralization, and that's one of the key factors that we hear about when we're talking about cryptocurrency, that it's decentralized. Another point that Quinn raised that really struck me was that despite the decentralization of these cryptocurrencies, we've got things like Coinbase and BitPay and these various exchanges and services that have sort of risen up around the cryptocurrency market that allow people to interface with these cryptocurrencies and use them in practical ways. And so many of these things are controlled by people like Peter Thiel and big, huge investors. What do you think about that?
A necessary transition. They're a necessary transition as we leave the fiat currencies and move into some other new system. Along the way, I expect a lot of these exchanges and services will be disintermediated themselves. So right now, it's a big deal, it's a problem in the United States, especially in Washington, as I noted, to do business and get dollars and convert them into cryptocurrencies. But once you're converted into cryptocurrencies, you need not involve yourself with any of these exchanges or any of that as long as you're staying within the cryptocurrency world. There's a lot of decentralized exchanges that nobody owns, that is peer-to-peer connections like Ether Delta and this sort of thing, where it's peer-to-peer exchanges of cryptocurrencies. So there's no third party involved. It's truly decentralized. And so, in fact, the disintermediation metaphor within the cryptocurrencies is continually refining itself. So we have Coinbase. We'll always probably have Coinbase until the dollar has basically been swept up into the new system. So maybe 2 or 3 decades even, who can say? But it will diminish in terms of its meaningfulness within the overall system as we go forward, as more and more people get into cryptos and then just simply don't come out.
Mm-hmm. Cindy the nurse is asking, what's the best software to mine Bitcoin? I think it might be a little bit out of the range of the average computer user at this point. Is that not correct?
That's correct, simply because of the speed that is involved with the large mining operations. There's much more economic currencies to mine, so to speak. Okay, so there's a lot of different protocols you can mine. You can mine Litecoin, Vertcoin, a number of different coins can be mined, and a lot of those softwares are free. If you really want to get into this, go to YouTube and just put in cryptocurrency mining, and then look at where you want to be on that sophistication layer, right? And so there are people that will gang up a lot of the graphics processing units, put them onto their own motherboards that they've crafted together, put a metal box around it, and stick this whole thing inside their furnace and disconnect the actual heating element of the furnace and just blow air across it to heat the house.
Wow.
But they're getting really sophisticated with it and making money while they're heating the house. And a lot of them are mining all the altcoins, where they have more power, is what it amounts to.
Well, but so let me ask you this. Let's say you're a nurse like Cindy and you don't have time to be building computers and, heating your house with them. What if you just, had a laptop, let's say, and you wanted to turn on a piece of software while you sleep? How long would it take to mine 1 Bitcoin on a laptop you would go buy at Best Buy?
It's not a question of how long. It would really be a question of if. Okay, because bear in mind that the consensus network, it's a cooperation, but it's a cooperation built around competition, where everybody wants that next Bitcoin that will be generated by the algorithm. In order to do that, you've got to be spot on time-wise, getting your processed block onto the blockchain, where everybody agrees you got there first before anybody else, so you get the reward. And so they've got very sophisticated computers operating at extremely fast with extremely fast chipsets, and they're able to complete the processing, which is the hash. That's what slows all the processing down in the mining, is the encryption part of it. So your laptop simply won't compete at that level.
It'll just always be losing the race.
Right, and mining is not necessarily the best route to get into unless you're really technically into it. Unless you're, a hardware geek, I really wouldn't mess with mining per se, nor would I mess with mining pools that are operated on software, because basically those are all scams.
Mining pools are scams.
The vast majority of them are, yes.
Trying to do what? Get malware into your computer?
No, it isn't that so much as they try and get you to buy into their mining pool by giving them cryptos, and it's a big Ponzi scheme kind of a thing, basically. And so they're paying out to the new guys some of the cryptos they've already got in order to entice them, but they're not really doing any mining. Okay, so you can't tell if someone's offering a legitimate mining pool, and if they're going to be doing pool mining and they're after the Bitcoins, they're not going to be sharing them.
Got it. And then what do we think about this statement from Novogratz? He rubbishes the Bitcoin bubble and says it's going to be 40,000 for a Bitcoin by December 2018. Do you think that's correct?
He reads my reports, but he's inaccurate. I said it would happen before August.
Before August, Bitcoin will be at 40,000.
Yeah, in my data sets from May to August, I've got two numbers that show up. One is 20,000. And I believe that we'll pass 20,000 sometime in early May. And then by the end of August, we'll be up to around 40,000.
Wow. And so for people who are maybe seeing you for the first time, I realize that's a very small segment probably of the people watching. But of course, Crowdsource the Truth isn't exclusively focused on cryptocurrency. So there's a lot of people who maybe are hearing about this for the first time. How accurate have your predictions been historically in terms of making these price goals for Bitcoin?
Extremely so. Scary accurate. Okay, my usual Alta report, predictive linguistics, I would say that my accuracy rate is around 50%, which is still, so half the stuff is wrong, but half the stuff is accurate on time, and that's still twice as good as chance. However, with the because the unique aspect of the cryptos, the fact that we're making up so many new words.
Sorry, you cut out. Back up there for just a second. Half
sure,
the stuff
okay.
is...
Okay, so half of my stuff is inaccurate but that's still twice as good as chance would allow. Okay, and that's consistent. I'm twice as good as chance with my Alta reports in the last 20 plus years. Now, with the cryptos, however, I've been much more accurate. And the reason that is because there have been so many new words that have had to have been invented within the cryptos. These words are not ambiguous. Therefore, we don't have any fuzziness that creeps in the data processing for the predictive linguistics. So I've been able to predict not only price points within the movement of Bitcoin, but also the temporal period it would show up in, and in some cases, how many times it would repeat in that loop before moving on. And I've been able to do this reasonably accurately these past number of years. Let's say since 2014, it really started differentiating linguistically from the general population with all these specialized words in cryptocurrencies, and I've been getting increasingly more accurate over time as that has occurred.
So your linguistic analysis allows you to predict the future price of Bitcoin?
Correct. I can predict the trends and tie those linguistically to certain time periods. And then within the trends, I will occasionally get words. And so my predictive linguistics, I always characterize it as I don't predict the events, I predict the headlines that will appear after the event, because the language is actually what's being predicted, not the event per se that's going to trigger the language. So sometimes I get the language exactly correct, but the event doesn't make any sense relative to the initial interpretation, even though the language showed up right on time. Sometimes it's reasonably accurate. So I had this one prediction. I made it about 5 months before it occurred. This was, we'll have to go back, but it was probably like 2013. It was, we can check it easy enough. And it was Blondes on Boats. Okay, that was the title of this little section, was Blondes on Boats. And it was all about this ship of state that was going to have a crash and cause a maritime disaster, and would all be due to a blonde woman being where she should not be at the time that this thing occurred. And it turned out that I was predicting what would ultimately become the Costa Concordia crash off of Sicily or Sardinia.
I remember that, yeah.
Okay, and so I did that 5 months ahead of time, and the linguistics were 80% fulfilled, which meant that 80% of the words that I had predicted showed up, and we got 80% of those right in the articles that were written after it occurred.
Huh.
So I'm predicting linguistics that will be appearing in our consciousness, making an impact on our consciousness some number of months out. So what I'm getting now in the data sets are linguistics for next year, and they're around the numbers 20,000 and then around the numbers 40,000 relative to the price of Bitcoin. And we can see why this would be the case, because those are very high emotional values that will be associated with those two milestones. Just as this year, I knew that we were going to reach a period where we would be at 10,000 before the end of the year and at 13,880 before the end of February.
Wow.
in Bitcoin. And it seems we're on track. But when I was making that 13,880 prediction back in summer of, or early fall of last year, so well over a year out, it seemed entirely outlandish because Bitcoin was in the 650 range.
But it just keeps seeming to go up. It's quite staggering. It really is amazing. You know, there was one other thing that Quinn Michaels pointed out that seemed, very significant to me when we were in Las Vegas. There are all these slot machines. I mean, this I noticed before Quinn discussed it. There are so many of these sort of new types of slot machines that have really gigantic 4K screens. I mean, very, very high resolution, lots of animated graphics and everything. I'm a computer graphics guy, and I mean, it's quite obvious to me that these computer-driven slot machines must have pretty substantial graphics processing units in them, and there's literally thousands, I think hundreds of thousands throughout Las Vegas. Quinn found in the WikiLeaks emails John Podesta scheduling a meeting with James Murin, the CEO of MGM Entertainment, and Andreessen Horowitz to talk about the future of cryptocurrency and payment cards and all this kind of thing. And granted, there was some amount of speculation going on, but Quinn was drawing a connection between crypto mining, MGM Entertainment possibly creating their own cryptocurrency based on Ethereum or Bitcoin or one of these types of things. We saw an ad just coincidentally walking around town for a Chase Manhattan MasterCard that was an M-Life loyalty program card. And we just were sort of speaking about this idea of cryptocurrencies that might be specific to the casino or the brand and mining them on these slot machines. You don't think that that's a reasonable theory or something that MGM might be planning? Why not?
It would put their core business at risk. Every time it had to stop and do the hash, all other activity in that GPU would shut down, and nobody's going to be gambling when that machine shut down as it's competing on a hash.
Well,
so
I think the
ability
idea was there's so many of them that are idle. Would it be unreasonable for them to make some sort of distributed processing program that would know when a system is idle and include it in the calculations and kick it out the second someone starts playing there?
Sure, you could do that, but the issue would it be reliable enough for whatever purpose it was going to actually serve? Because distributed processing systems subject to real-life interaction with humans walking through and causing changes in those systems are going to be very unreliable. Especially on something like that's concentrated like the hash. You don't understand what these machines have to go through to complete hashing for various different kinds of cryptos. So it is possible that MGM is going to introduce their own cryptocurrency. It makes a lot of sense to get themselves out of the dollar business, where you'd come on in and exchange your cryptos or your dollars for their currencies, and it also locks you up and keeps you into their system, so to speak.
And
because
they're
your
definitely
currency,
trying to do that. The whole M-Life, keep you on their card, their points, that kind of thing.
Also, the high-res monitors and stuff you were talking about are all to try and trip the dopamine response. I am familiar with a lot of the software goals within the displays of these machines, and they would be in direct conflict with any other use because their goal is to induce you into this state of dopamine receptivity with your actions with that machine. And so this requires basically the entire resources of the machine in order to keep that entrainment going, such that you keep feeding in the money that the M life demands.
Right. Yeah.
So no, I don't find it credible from a business perspective, and it would require a whole nother IT department just to manage. You'd have the systems fighting each other. There's all different kinds of business reasons that it wouldn't make a lot of sense. Having their own currency makes a lot of sense, and that would be distributed and handled in an entirely different way.
One final question I want to ask you. There's been obviously this huge purge in Saudi Arabia. I've been very interested for some time in the link between the United States, foreign policy, Saudi Arabia, the petrodollar, and all of that. And obviously, the entire value of the US dollar is tied to the worldwide demand for oil, and the US OPEC stipulation that people must purchase oil and sell oil only for dollars. How do you see cryptocurrency? Obviously Saddam Hussein wanted to sell oil for euros. I think the Chinese and the Russians might want to make the yuan the US reserve currency. Do you see a cryptocurrency supplanting the petrodollar at some point within our lifetimes? How will that affect foreign policy and Saudi Arabian Kingdom and the United States and all of that?
It's a power shifter. It's a game changer that pulls the tablecloth off the table, kicks the table out of the area, yanks the chairs out from underneath all of the players, and puts holes in the floor.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's going to be a serious changer all the way around. No, I don't think there will be a cryptocurrency that will be a global reserve, but just having the cryptocurrencies themselves instantly becomes a global reserve, where you have the holding of the reserve distributed through the entire mass of the populations that are within the geographic borders that you're attempting to deal with. And so it has supplanted the petrodollar, but the petrodollar had to die, was dying anyway. It was dying since they created the thing, basically. No currency of any form so far, no centralized managed currency has ever lasted longer than 72 years. Most of them keel over between 40 years and 52. And so most currencies die young. And our currency has been held together by the blood that we were willing to cause others to shed in order to keep it going. These last 30 years, as the bond yields cratered and we got down to 0% interest, a bad sign for any currency, and then hyperinflation, which we're seeing in the cryptocurrencies, etc. So the cryptos are a evolutionary boost from universe such that most Americans don't have to die along with the petrodollar. Because if without that dollar, we're not going to be able to convince people to give us the stuff we need, and we don't produce much of it. And so as a social order, we're very much like Japan or Germany after the end of World War II, where everything is bombed out around us, and we're living on the charities of others. And so as this goes on, we're going to have to snap to, as a population, realize we're living on the charity of others to give us goods for these digital dollars that they're creating infinitely. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to clean up our act, start manufacturing stuff to do fair trading, etc., as the petrodollar is dying anyway. The good news is we've got cryptocurrencies. The system is evolving rapidly and may save many people in Western republics from dying from the lack of the credit system. Because the credit system that we live under is what gets food in the middle of New York in the middle of winter. It's not dollars. It's all in arrears. Everything is always paid backwards, so to speak, and we're operating on credit. Mm-hmm. Someone puts the food in the store with the promise to pay for that food from the store owner at some point in the future. And basically that's how that works on this just-in-time credit system. Right. And so because it's a just-in-time credit and debit system, or debt system, and it's tied to the petrodollar, as it dies, that whole system is at risk of dying, and we're seeing it crumble around us now. And so we need something to replace it. So I'm saying hooray for cryptocurrencies. It's a working system, and it can be made to work better in the future.
Do you think there's any examples of cryptocurrency helping the economic crisis that's going on, let's say, in Venezuela, for instance?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. A lot of the people in Venezuela have the ability to eat because they either had cryptocurrencies, they have something they can sell for cryptocurrencies outside of the Venezuelan borders, or they're mining cryptos. And
Really?
there, they've gotten very energetic about mining the altcoins, where you're competing with fewer people, more likely to get a reward by supplying that backbone, etc. But a lot of the individuals had opened up approach to things and decided to sell their goods and so forth for cryptocurrencies, and have been able to bring that in, and it's a support system. Not enough that the country is stable in that regard, and it's still going to have to go through some big gyrations, but that's happening around the entire petrodollar empire. Empires always crumble from the edges, and so it'll be probably 2 years before the petrodollar empire crumble would hit New York and shut down New York, and maybe a third or half the population would have to leave because there wouldn't be supplies.
That's not too long, 2 years.
No, but see, it's not going to happen now. It's probably not going to happen because we have cryptocurrencies sucking all of the wealth out of the dying petrodollar system and providing the functional business relationships that keep everything going, absent a credit system.
Wow. It's hard to fully process. I'll tell you, Cliff, one of the smartest financial guys, if not the smartest financial guy that I know, is Charles Ortel. And he has repeatedly told me the classic question that he has is, why is a Bitcoin worth anything? And that might be a difficult question to answer. I mean, you've been answering it throughout the course of this whole conversation. So hopefully Charles will listen to this and maybe he'll have something to add. But this has been a fascinating conversation. I hope you'll come back and we can continue to explore some of this. I appreciate you shedding light on some of these really complicated topics. And is there anything that you wanted to share with everyone before we go?
No, nothing I can think of. Good luck to us all in the future, and get into cryptos.
Right, and certainly people can go to your website there, halfpasthuman.com. They can purchase the report. They can learn about all of the incredible information that you're sharing, and read it a couple times, because for me it's difficult to get this stuff on the first take, but it sounds really good. And people should also be following you on Twitter, Clif_High on Twitter. Keep up with all of that. I would encourage people, if you like the broadcasts here at Crowdsource the Truth, get on to paypal.me, crowdsource the truth, or patreon.com, crowdsource the truth, and become a sponsor. If you're a Bitcoin millionaire and you're out there, you can sponsor the channel with Bitcoin, and we will survive the collapse of the petrodollar.
There you go.
And we can keep.
Do you have your address for donations? Is it posted?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and I want to clarify, I never refer to payments that people make to Crowdsource the Truth as donations, because I feel, as you do, that words have power, and to suggest that it's a donation might falsely imply that this is a charitable organization. This is a business, it's a news agency, and if you choose to sponsor it, you're paying money to a private business. It is not tax deductible, but you are keeping the independent news alive. And of course, if I worked for CNN or Fox or MSNBC, there'd be some big company paying me a check. I'd have to say what they want. But if I have 33,000 viewers who each sent $1 a month, the organization would stay financially healthy, or a fraction of a Bitcoin, whatever it is that they might send. The Bitcoin address is in the description box for this video, and people can also always email truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org. I can answer any questions and provide any crypto payment addresses that you might like to utilize to sponsor the channel. I want to thank my guest, Clif High. Wonderful to speak to you. I'm so glad we got this chance to meet, and thanks for all that great information.
Thank you. We'll do it again in the future.
Very good. Have a good weekend, Cliff. See everybody tomorrow. Thanks for watching, everyone.